just stop. Here's Ross, the host with today's dose of common sense.
Hey, how are you? Welcome back. So, really, just stop. We already talked about the Charlie Kirk assassination, but there's a whole lot of garbage out there, and there always is in the immediate aftermath of something tragic, a terrorist attack, or a building collapses, or a big fire, or the cops kill you, or the ATF shoots your dog, whatever it might be. There's always going to be a lot of confusion, at least for the first 24 hours. Often long after that, it can be 2-3 days before the information catches up with the people who are observing the situation. You've probably heard people talk a lot about how eyewitness testimony isn't always that reliable, and in fact, it's generally not that reliable. There's a very funny story that involved me being a witness, an eyewitness to something, but we're not gonna talk about it because it's inappropriate for this circumstance. But it is kind of funny. But maybe I'll tell that story one of these days. So just so everybody understands what's going on today, the T-shirt is Jesus telling you you're all a bunch of disappointments, which probably true. But after the Charlie Kirk assassination, which that's what we've all agreed, that's what we're going to call it. Then I don't know who all of us are who agree to it, but as is typical, everybody has the breaking news. Everybody's going to bring out their expert, and they're going to start analyzing things. You know, they always have their terrorism analyst on, or they have their financial analyst on, or their geopolitical analyst on, things like that. And oftentimes they're completely wrong about what's happening. But there's really a reason for that. So I thought I would explain it. First of all, they're just going to grab whoever they can grab. So if anybody is considered an expert in any specific thing, then, you know, like if you're an expert on crime and justice, let's say, they're going to grab you and they're going to say, sit down here. We need to talk about what's happening right now. But if you happen to be an expert in a particular area, like, say, this circumstance, Charlie Kirk was killed by a, I don't know, medium range rifle shot. They're going to start looking for, you know, trained snipers, trained military personnel. They're going to try to find anybody, maybe an FBI SWAT guy. And they're going to want to get them in front of the camera and start talking about the situation. And you're going to hear people talking about all sorts of nonsense. People are going to start making declarations like, oh, this was definitely this, or it was definitely that. And it's almost never that. But it's because, and it's not because that person isn't an expert on whatever narrow field of study they have. It's that they're an expert on a narrow field of study. So you run out and you grab your nearest Navy SEAL sniper guy and you throw him in front of a camera and you start talking about this situation. Or you go grab, they love grabbing special operations people, or they'll go grab, you know, a Green Beret guy or somebody in the FBI, and they'll start talking about this stuff. Well, everyone starts analyzing it from their own perspective, from their own limited experience or narrow field of expertise. So in a lot of ways, they start thinking of, how would I do it? Well, that doesn't mean anything, how you would have done it, but it starts to taint your analysis because they start talking about, well, I would have been inside this building over here, so he's probably inside this building over here. Well, no, he was actually on the rooftop, or he was probably, because of the cordons around the festival or whatever, he had to be 400 yards away at least, so that's a trained sniper. Not really. A lot of people can shoot at 400 yards, and, well, he was actually at 180, 200 when all is said and done, things like that. I have heard, and I didn't mean to chuckle there, but it seems just ridiculous to me. some of the analysis that I've heard and read, but the most ridiculous one that I've heard so far is this had to be a trained expert sniper because that shot was precisely in the neck where it would do the most damage and he would bleed out the fastest. Stop it. Just stop it. That's fucking stupid. Nobody aimed at Charlie Kirk's neck. Nobody. Somebody aimed somewhere else on Charlie Kirk, and that's where the bullet wound up going. So they drag out the, whatever, I don't know, Green Beret guy. And he'll start talking about, oh, yeah, you're definitely going to need this or need that, or you got to have this. You're going to have an escape. You're going to have an accomplice. And then it's always some dumbass dude, one dude with a rifle somewhere, because, or they'll say, oh, yeah, I could have made this shot easy. Oh, this would be easy. It'd be easy to get away with it too, and all that. But, military snipers, they have plans. They have backup. They have support. They have aircraft. They can call for fire. They can call in an A-10 Warthog to take out whatever is bothering them and stuff like that. And we've got to have an exfiltration plan. Well, your exfiltration plan is to run to the landing zone and just get picked up by a helicopter and take off. So I don't know if you can hear all that bleepity bleep stuff that's going on. It may not come through on the recording, but my computer for some reason is connecting and disconnecting something. It's probably aliens or the FBI. But when you start talking to somebody who has that type of experience, that has no relevance really on what's going on at some university where somebody got shot. So they can talk about marksmanship and, I did see a lot of people rightfully saying, it doesn't really require an expert sniper to make this kind of a shot. It's only 200 yards, 200 meters, whatever it's going to turn out to be. And that is true. Anybody who has qualified on a weapon for the military has shot at 200 meters. And we used to do some analysis on this, and a lot of people missed the 300 meter target, but that's because a human sized target at 300 meters, when you're shooting with iron sights, a lot of times the front sight covers up the entire target. So yeah, you just have to be off a little bit to miss that one. A lot of people miss the 150 meter target, and that has to do with the point of aim versus point of impact. And that's back when we all used to zero our weapons at 25 meters. Everybody did it that way. But what you get is roughly, and yeah, I know some sniper geek out there is going to be like, no, well, actually it's this, but whatever. But essentially, kind of the way it works is 25 meters, 250 meters or so, 200, 250 meters, the point of impact is relatively the same. It's close. So not very many people miss the 200 meter target because the point of impact is so close to how they zeroed their rifle. Again, when we're using iron sights. But they'll use the intermediate targets and they'll lose the far target because they're not compensating for bullet drop and all that other stuff. They stop shooting for center mass because essentially the rifle, like an AR-15 or an M16, it's kind of arranged that between 0 and 300 meters, if you aim at center mass, that bullet should hit somewhere on that person when it impacts with that person. But you have to aim center mass in order to do that, because you've got a 1 foot circle of possible impacts. But you'll get a lot of people on there talking about this expert and that expert talking about, well, he had to do this, he had to do that. This had to be a trained marksman. This had to be anybody who hunts with their dad or their grandpa a couple times has taken a shot at that. And some people hunt at 1,000 yards with 338 Lapua Magnums and stuff like that, all kinds of ridiculous things. I believe this was a 30-06. It was a Mauser bolt-action rifle. And one of the things that an expert threw up on social media was a picture of an old Mauser from like the 50s or something. A modern Mauser is nothing like the old Mausers that we used during World War II and stuff. Not me, I'm not that old yet. But yeah, anybody who's going to put up a picture, oh yeah, that Mauser that your great grandfather used, in the war, in the Great War, that's not the same rifle. Mauser is still in business. They're still manufacturing. They have a modern manufacturing facilities. They have modern design. It's fine. It's not an old beat up World War One Mauser or whatever. I don't even know if they used it with World War One, but probably. I lose track sometimes. So stop thinking about those kind of things. This was a modern rifle. It was in a synthetic stock. It had a variable power scope on it. I didn't get, there's one, picture of it that I've seen so far, and it's hard to tell anything other than it was in a synthetic stock and it had a scope on it. But it was a modern scope. It wasn't like grandpa's scope. It was a modern, technologically advanced kind of scope. It doesn't mean it was an expensive scope or anything, and it doesn't mean it's an expensive rifle. It doesn't have to be. A lot of people make those mistakes too. They're like, oh, you're going to have a state-of-the-art rifle and optics and all this other stuff and range finders and things. No, you don't. You really don't. And they make themselves look foolish up there, but most of the people watching it don't understand it either. So they just take what this person says. And, I fielded a lot of questions from people I know in the last couple of days. And they're like, well, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, what about it? What are you talking about this for? It's not even relevant to the thing, And it'll be something like, well, it was the wind at that distance. I'm like, no, that distance isn't really that big of a deal. And I just keep telling people, we train 18-year-old kids to hit a target at 200 meters with iron sights every single day. And most of the time, if they've received proper marksmanship training, I don't know how many of them do anymore, but they're going to hit that target. It's that simple. But the experts, when they drag them out, it's really because of their experience. They start comparing it to their own experiences, and they are not the same at all, unless you're an assassin who goes around using your dad's rifle to take out targets, specifically at 200 meters from the top of a parking deck or something. Otherwise, your experience is not the same. And what you would do to prepare for that sort of thing is not going to be the same as some guy who just wakes up one morning and decides that he wants to go kill someone. Your preparations, your frame of mind, everything, what you decide to wear on your feet that day, everything is going to be different from that person because you're a professional marksman, a professional soldier, or whatever you are. And yes, you may be an expert on sniping things and all of that stuff, but you're not an expert on how human beings think, and you're not an expert on removing yourself from your own experience. So your analysis gets tainted by your own narrow field of expertise. And there's, I'm not trying to badmouth people, but you have to be very, very careful within the first couple of days who you're going to pay attention to on television when they start flapping their yap. Because a lot of them are just going to be wrong because they have no idea what happened yet. And even after they figure out what happened, now they're going to start trying to work their way backward and overlay their own experiences onto the evidence and the facts that we have so far. And that's where you're going to get the second gunman stuff all the time. People are going to hear an echo of a shot and they're going to think, I heard 2 gunshots, and you're going to have all of this nonsense that goes on every single time, every time. And there's no way to avoid it because the news media is going to want to get an expert in front of the camera as soon as they can, and they're just going to go. And they're going to start rambling on. Well, tell us. Oh, you spent time in Afghanistan as a sniper. Tell us about your thing. It's like they'll get Nick Irving or someone like that, right? And put them on there. Nick Irving's a great guy. He and I were in the same edition of Soldier of Fortune magazine once, back when I worked for SOF Mag. But they'll bring him on, and not that he's not an expert, because he is. He's an expert marksman. He's an expert on long-range shooting. He's a sniper. He was a Ranger sniper, and that's nothing to scoff at. But his experience will be laid over what happened there, and he'll start. Experts want other people to think the way they do, and they're just not going to. Most instances where you're going to have a shooting like this, it's just some dude who decided, I got to kill Charlie Kirk. That's my mission in life. And they're not going to worry about too many other things. Most of them know they're going to get caught. And a lot of times they just commit suicide because they don't want to go to prison for the rest of their life. They accomplished their goal. Let's just shoot myself now. And yeah, there's a whole lot of buzzwords that are going to go around in this episode that probably will get me kicked off of whatever places I'm at. But a lot of people want to look for motive as well. So they're like, wait, we got to find out what's motivating this guy or whatever. Sometimes the motivation is just that they want to kill someone and they just pick a target. But we can't rely on experts because none of them are an expert on how this person thought or how this person planned or didn't plan or how lucky this guy was. Or when you go back and look at it, you're like, wow, this was stupid. How did this guy actually even get in there? Carrying a rifle stuffed down his pants, things like that. And you were like, this had to be an inside job. Somebody had to let him in. That's where you start getting, it all just starts expanding. Because once you figure out that, wow, that seemed awfully easy for him to get where he needed to go with a rifle, then you have to start adding in other layers of conspiracy where, well, somebody had to let him on campus. Oh, somebody had to let him in that building. Somebody had to let him up those stairs so he could get onto the rooftop, and somebody had to do this, and he had to have a lookout. And no, now the guy standing behind Charlie Kirk was giving signals, and I don't have a hat, which is weird because I make hats. But, there's a hat back there. Hold on. There we go. Alonze. If you don't get the reference, that's a Doctor Who reference. Dr. 10. Wasn't that right? Well, you got the guy behind him. It looks like, in the one angle, it looks like he's directly behind Charlie Kirk, but he's not. He's like more than 10 feet away. But, he reaches up and he adjusts the brim of his hat. That's all he does. Probably itched. It's probably hot out there. He might be starting to sweat. So he's got to move the sweat band a little bit around a little bit. Oh, that's a signal. He's signaling the sniper. Well, that guy turns out to be like one of Charlie Kirk's best friends. He's signaling the sniper to take him out. That it's good. And then the other guy is giving signals. We'll talk about that next. But so people took this, if you're watching on video, they took this, I'm going to grab the brim of my hat or the bill of my hat, and I'm going to wiggle it a little bit. And then they go find this chart of military hand signals for, silent movement, when you're moving around in the jungle. And it's all these hand movements and hand and arm stuff to signal each other and what they mean. And we've all seen it. If you've been in the military or in law enforcement or whatever, you've probably seen these things. So they say that he's signaling the sniper. That's the signal for sniper. No, it's not. The signal for sniper is cupping your hand in a circle like you're looking through a telescope. It's not grabbing the brim of your hat, the bill of your hat, whatever people call them nowadays. I don't like ball cap style hats. I think they look stupid. Most people wear them, well, not most. A lot of people wear them backwards, like they're still a toddler or something. So you get a guy in oversized shorts, big floppy shoes, an oversized t-shirt, and his hat on backwards, and he looks like he's 5 and his grandmother dressed him up. Yep, I said it. You look stupid. You're a grown-up. Stop doing it. Anyway, it's a completely different hand signal, but people, it looks similar if you don't actually pay attention to what you're looking at. But it's not. It's a guy holding his hand like he's looking through a scope in front of his eye. That means I think I see a sniper. And if you hold your rifle in the air upside down, pointing in a direction, that means enemy that way. There's all sorts of signals that nobody actually uses, as far as I know. I mean, I spent a lot of years in the military, and I've never seen anybody use them. So I don't know if anybody does anymore, but they're there. They were there for our education and use. We just ignored them. But those conspiracies have to be thrown in now and overlaid on top of things because, well, it just seems too easy. And, the whole Occam's razor thing, this is how it went. And everybody has to go, no, that's not how it went. There's no way that that's how it was done. There's just no way. There has to be more people involved. There has to be a large conspiracy. There has to be all of that stuff every single time. Just like when they tried to assassinate Trump, we got all of that. We're still saying conspiracies about that. This is not going to go away either. And this was a tragic thing. And one thing that I don't think some people are, because I've seen people discussing it, but that video hit the internet within minutes, probably within less than 5 minutes of it happening. That's how I saw it. And it's incredibly graphic. And now they have, 7 or 8 different angles of it happening. And it's incredibly graphic. And we're at the point now in technology where technology outpaces common sense. So those raw, unedited videos are out there. And if you want to see them, they're easy to find. But we now have a nation of people who've been traumatized by what they saw. And someone I saw on X did explain that, why are people having such an emotional reaction to this one? And it's because everyone saw it in living color, in high definition. And those types of things are generally reserved for military personnel, firefighters, paramedics, police officers. Those things generally aren't seen live on television by an entire nation, by tens of millions of people probably by now have seen that, if not more. And so if you're not used to seeing that sort of thing, it definitely can impact your mental health. You can be traumatized by it, and you should be traumatized by it. So don't think you're weird if you're a bit traumatized about it, because you should be. You absolutely should be. Saying something like that is a lot. It's a lot to deal with. Unfortunately, it's not the first thing I've seen by far. So, seen worse, but nobody should be looking to see that stuff, because you don't understand that you're implanting small traumas in your brain every time you seek out that kind of, visual. Real life stuff is what I'm talking about. So, you got to be careful with that. So, yeah, anyway, I don't know. Nobody's going to listen to that part. But the other issue with the experts is that they're not detectives. They're not investigators. They're not trained. They're not experienced at investigating a situation that happened. So they start jumping to conclusions. They start, like I said, overlaying their own experience and their own training and their own expectations onto other people and things like that. And they're guessing. They're just taking guesses. So if you're trained as an investigator, that's not what you do. You look at very specifically at the facts and the evidence. So after I watched the video one time, I knew that it was a shot from an upward angle. I knew that it was a shot from about a .30 caliber bullet. You can tell that by the report of the rifle and by the size of the wound, the exit wound. So I know it's getting a little bit graphic, but those are things that I understand. And so I'm able to take those facts and come to these conclusions just by listening to the video and watching the video once or twice. And I'm like, okay, this is what happened. It doesn't mean I know everything about what happened. It just means, yeah, no, that's not an AR-15, because that doesn't sound like an AR-15. They have a very distinct sound. Different caliber bullets make different sounds when they're traveling through the air and when they leave the barrel of a rifle. And so you have that, and then you have the echo effects in the amphitheater little thing there, and you have the way people looked, where people looked during it, because people are going to turn around and start looking for the sound that they just heard. They heard the gunshot go off, and people are going to start panicking and running, preferably away from where the shooting started. So you can tell a lot just from the initial videos and things, but you can't start guessing and start speculating about this must have been this or this must have been that, because it didn't must have been anything up until someone is able to prove, like, for instance, my initial response to it, until someone can prove that what I believe happened. Anything is possible. You can assume you can. You have to leave the possibility open that it could have come from a shot from the crowd, could have come from a shot from the side. It could have been this or could have been that. So until you actually have the evidence and the facts in your hand, even the speculating that I was doing, that even though it was founded in an investigator's approach and understanding that process, it can still be wrong. It'll probably be closer than some other people's guesses, but it can still be wrong. So you still have to say, I have got to wait. I have to wait for more information, because there might be a different angle that sounds different. There might be a different angle that tells me something else that I didn't see the first time because I only watched the one video, things like that. So I had those conversations with my friends and coworkers because we were discussing it, and I was talking about my suspicions and, how I interpreted what I saw and heard. And it turned out that it was correct, but I didn't go online on social media and start telling people what my theory was, because it still had the chance of being wrong. So, and we've talked about this a lot, if you've been, following me on social media for years, is you have to wait at least 24 hours before you start throwing things out there about your opinion and your analysis and your expertise, because you don't know anything yet. All you know is Charlie Kirk got shot. That's the basis, the basis of all of your conjecture that will follow. That's all you knew. You didn't know how many people, even know how many rounds got fired, even though most people could tell that it was just one. But anyway, that's the only reason why they're wrong a lot of the time, is because they rush out there and they start making judgments and they start speculating, and then they're not trained detectives. They're not doing a forensic analysis of anything. They're just going, this person had to have shot them from a distance, which means they must have been an expert shooter with a high quality rifle and high quality optics and blah blah blah. And they say stupid things, some of them. And there's a lot of people out there who think they're experts who are not. They're absolutely not. Because let me tell you something, being in the military, being a law enforcement officer, even being like, I don't know, a ranger, a special forces guy, does not mean you're an expert at any of that shit. It doesn't. Because we're not out there training people to murder other people. So yes, occasionally you have to do some things like that. The old stories of Vietnam and Carlos Hathcock and all those guys who snuck around in the jungle for days waiting until they could find a Vietnamese general or whatever and take him out, that sort of things. But that's still different. It's still very different than just some guy deciding that he needs to kill somebody that he saw on television. It's going to be different. And so you can't look at it from the lens of your own expertise, because this person doesn't have that. So they're not going to plan the operation the same way you would. They're not going to plan their exfiltration the same way you would, obviously, because this guy just jumped off the roof of a building and probably really injured his leg at least. And so that's not how you would have done it. I mean, I'm not even a sniper. That's not how I would have done it. But we can't allow our knowledge and our experiences to inform something like this. You have to wait until you have the information. And so that's why they're wrong a lot of the times right outside the gate. And a lot of them will revise their opinions over the next couple of days. And as more information comes out, I mean, they've already, I think they already buried him. There's a video out there of his wife at his grave and stuff, or at his casket with him in it and things like that. So there should have been more released by now, like the coroner's report. I hope they did an autopsy. We all saw what happened, but it's still forensically and historically and for future reference, we need to know exactly what happened. Where did the bullet enter? Because the one thing that keeps confusing me is everyone's idea of entry and exit. So yeah, a lot of people have been talking about the experts, the actual experts who understand wound ballistics and things like that. Have been talking about wound cavitation and all that sort of stuff, about the expansion and the shockwave sort of thing, and then the vacuum that happens. But it looks, now this is not, I'm not even going to say that this is what happened, but the movement of his body was not consistent with taking a shot directly through the neck. It just isn't. So there's other things going on. So I don't know if, and like I said, I don't know. When I say I don't know, that's what I mean. I'm not speculating, and I'm not trying to say this is what happened. I don't know. But to me, it looks like the entry wound is not right there. I think a lot of people are assuming that the bullet hit and exited right through the side of his neck. But that's all soft tissue. There's no bone in there or anything until you get to the spine. So to me, it doesn't look like that's the only thing that happened. And I don't mean that that's the only bullet that hit him, or that's what this or that, or that's not what I mean. One round, but I question if it didn't ricochet off of something inside of him and exit through his neck. So you will watch his chest heave and his shirt fly up and different things like that, which really wouldn't be consistent with just taking a bullet through soft tissue through the side of your neck, even though it's going to catch your carotid, your jugular, or whatever, and you're going to bleed out very rapidly. It's still just passing through soft tissue. So I have questions about that. And until, if they ever release a coroner's report where we can see entry and exit trajectory stuff and things like that, I'm keeping my mind open to it, because I'm not really accepting the simple explanation until I see like a coroner's report and some sketches and things like that to show. And then I have to sit down and ponder it myself and figure out, well, why did his body react that way from a shot through the neck? Because he goes forward first a little bit and his chest heaves. And I don't know, it just, to me, that doesn't look consistent with somebody just taking a shot through soft tissue in the neck. I could be wrong, because again, I'm not an expert on how a human body is going to react that way to taking a 30-06 round through the neck, but it looks like there's something going on in the upper chest. So anyway, we won't know any of that until more information comes out. So I don't like speculating. I'm just saying that it looks not as simple as people are trying to make it out to be as far as the wound goes, the wound itself, not the incident, but the wound. But that's why. And I think that's about all I have to say about this. That's why most of your experts, or a lot of your experts, are going to be wrong a little bit, because they're rushing and they're working off of their own expertise and their own knowledge, and that's just not going to be the same thing as the guy who takes the shot. So they do things that don't make sense because they're not experts. Sometimes they get lucky. Sometimes they fail, as in Trump, trying to take out Trump, and you just realize that you're not really that great of a shot, or you get too nervous and you can't control your line of sight and all this other stuff. There's a million different factors that play into it. So this person obviously was not aiming for his neck, but that's where the round exited and caused the damage that we all saw in the video. But if you haven't seen it, don't go look at the video. Just take my advice. Just don't. There's no need for it. You don't need to see it. So everybody, take care. I'm going to do another podcast probably today on a different topic, but I just wanted to get that's been on my mind a lot the last couple of days, because a lot of people have come up to me and they're like, what about this expert saying this and that? I'm like, that's bullshit. That's I don't know why you're even telling me about this, because that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then explaining to them why. But again, I'm not an assassination expert. I'm just a trained investigator and detective, and I know how to follow clues. So anyway, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. But like I said, don't intentionally go traumatize yourself looking for those videos. If it's part of your job, like if you're an investigator or a homicide detective or whatever, and you need to understand what happened in order to put that in your experience and expertise pouch for later on in case, come across something similar. Or if you're a sniper and you need to see, if you're trying to figure out what happened and how it happened, because that's important for your career or something, fine. That's your job. But if it's not, just try to avoid it. You'll thank me later. Maybe. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and I will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Really? Just Stop with your host, Ross. Make sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss a dose of some common sense.